Ruth took her boyfriend Bernie home to meet her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bloom. "What do you do for a living?" asked Mr. Bloom. "I own some property," replied Bernie. "Some property?" exclaimed Ruth. "He owns a chain of fast-rising retail stores." "And where do you live?" asked Mrs. Bloom. "I've got an apartment in town." "An apartment!" cried Ruth. "He has a luxury apartment in the most sought-after block in Manhattan." "And what are your prospects?" inquired Mr. Bloom. "I'm hoping to expand," said Bernie. "Expand!" interrupted Ruth. "He's planning to buy Bloomingdale's." Just then, Bernie sneezed. "Have you got a cold?" asked Mrs. Bloom. "A cold!" shrieked Ruth. "Bernie's got pneumonia." One dot, 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 dot. Three Englishmen walk into a bar and spot a Welshman sitting alone at a table. One fellow said to the others, "Let's pick a fight with that Welshman over there." His partner replied, "Wait, we don't want to be arrested. Let's make him start the fight." The third Englishman said, "Wait here, chaps. I know how to do it." He went over to the Welshman and said, "St. David was a flippin' sissy." To this, the Welshman replied, "Ah, well, you don't say," and calmly resumed drinking his beer. The second Englishman now tried his luck and said to the Welshman, "St. David was a stupid fool that wore a dress." The Welshman again replied, "You're very sharp, you don't say," and calmly resumed drinking his beer. The last Englishman told his friends he knew how to rile the Welshman and bounced up to the table and yelled, "St. David was an Englishman." The Welshman replied calmly, "That's what your mates were trying to tell me." A little boy walks into kitchen and says to his dad, "Granny's got a prawn." His father asks what he means, and the little boy repeats, "Granny's got a prawn." His dad asks him to show him what he means, so he takes him into the living room, and Granny's laid stark naked. The little boy points to her protruding clitoris and says, "Look, Granny's got a prawn." His dad tells him it's not a prawn, to which the little boy replies, "Well, it tastes like a prawn." Three dots. Three elderly men are at the doctor's office for a memory test. The doctor asks the first man, "What is 3 times 3? The man thought for a moment and answered, 274. The doctor rolls his eyes and looks up at the ceiling and says to the second man, "It's your turn." "What is 3 times 3? "Tuesday," replies the second man. The doctor shakes his head sadly, then asks the third man, "Okay, your turn." "What's 3 times 3? The third man quickly answers, 9. "That's great," says the doctor. "How did you get that?" "Simple," he says. "Just subtract 274 from Tuesday." Teacher, what's 1 minus 1? Johnny, 1 minus 1? Teacher, yes. If you subtract 1 from 1, what do you get? Johnny, 1. Teacher, no. Johnny, try again. Johnny, 2. Teacher, okay, let's do it this way. If you have only 1 potato chip left in a frying pan and you take it out of the pan. Johnny, I know the answer. Cooking oil. Punch. A teacher noticed that little Johnny, who was sitting at the back of the class, was squirming around, scratching his groin, and not paying attention. She went back to find out what was going on. Little Johnny was quite embarrassed and whispered that he had just recently been circumcised and he was quite itchy down there. The teacher told him to go down to the principal's office. The principal told him to telephone his mother and ask her what he should do about it. He did and returned to his class. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the back of the room. The teacher went back to investigate, only to find little Johnny sitting at his desk with his private part hanging out. The teacher demanded, "I thought I told you to call your mom." Little Johnny replied, "I did, miss, and she told me that if I could stick it out till noon, she'd come and pick me up from school." Toward the end of the service, the minister asked, "How many of you have forgiven your enemies?" About 80% of the congregation raised their hands. The minister repeated the question. This time, everyone responded, except for one small elderly lady. "Mrs. Jones," the minister asked, "are you not willing to forgive your enemies?" With a sweet smile, she replied, "I don't have any." "Mrs. Jones, that's very unusual. How old are you?" 98, she answered proudly. The minister, intrigued, said, "Oh, Mrs. Jones, would you please come down to the front and tell us all how a person can live 98 years and not have a single enemy in the world?" The little lady slowly walked down the aisle, faced the congregation, and said, "I outlived them all." Sat Dashamlov. A very elegant lady on a flight from Switzerland found herself seated next to a kind-looking priest. Leaning over, she whispered, "Excuse me, Father, may I ask a favor?" "Of course, my child. How can I help?" he replied warmly. "I just bought a very expensive, high-tech hair remover, and I'm way over the customs limit. I'm afraid they'll confiscate it. Would you be willing to hide it under your robe?" The priest paused. "I'll do it, my child, but you must know, I cannot tell a lie." "You have an honest face, Father. I doubt they'll even question you," she said, slipping him the device. When they landed and the priest stepped up to customs, the officer asked, "Father, do you have anything to declare?" He calmly answered, "From the top of my head to my sash, I have nothing to declare, my son." The officer, raising an eyebrow, said, "And from the sash down?" With a straight face, the priest replied, "I have there a marvelous little instrument designed for use by women, but which has never been used." The customs officer burst out laughing. "Go ahead, Father. Next." "Yet to. Would you mind telling me, Doctor," Bob asked, "how you detect a mental deficiency in somebody who appears completely normal?" "Nothing is easier," he replied. "You ask him a simple question which everyone should answer with no trouble. If he hesitates, that puts you on the track." "What sort of question?" "Well, you might ask him, 'Captain Cook made 3 trips around the world and died during one of them. Which one?'" Bob thought for a moment and then said with a nervous laugh, "You wouldn't happen to have another example, would you? I must confess I don't know much about history." 9. A nun was flying to Chicago. She went to the airport and sat down, waiting for her flight. She looked over in the corner and saw one of those weight machines that tells your fortune. "So," she thought to herself, "I'll give it a try just to see what it tells me." She went over to the machine and put her nickel in, and out came a card that said, "You're a nun. You weigh 118 pounds, and you are going to Chicago, Illinois." She sat back down and thought about it. She told herself it probably tells everyone the same thing, but decided to try it again. She put her nickel in, and out came a card that read, "You're a nun. You weigh 118 pounds. You're going to Chicago, Illinois, and you are going to play a fiddle." The nun said to herself, "I know that's wrong. I have never played a musical instrument a day in my life." She sat back down. From out of nowhere, a cowboy came over and set his fiddle case down next to her. The nun picked up the fiddle and started playing beautiful music. Startled, she looked back at the machine and said, "This is incredible! I've got to try it again." Back to the machine she went, put her nickel in, and another card came out. It said, "You're a nun. You weigh 118 pounds. You're going to Chicago, Illinois, and you're going to break wind." Now, the nun knew the machine was wrong. "I've never broken wind in public in my whole life." Just then, she tripped, fell off the scales, and broke wind. Stunned, she sat back down and looked at the machine. She said to herself, "This is truly unbelievable. I've got to try it one more time." She went back to the machine, put her nickel in, and collected the card. It said, "You're a nun. You weigh 118 pounds. You have fiddled and farted around and missed your flight to Chicago." But the plumber, "We repair what your husband fixed." Sign at the psychic's hotline. "Don't call us, we'll call you." At a towing company, "We don't charge an arm and a leg. We want TOWs. Appropriate action." On maternity room door, push, push, push. At an optometrist's office, "If you don't see what you're looking for, you've come to the right place." On a taxidermist's window, "We really know our stuff." In a podiatrist's office, in a veterinarian's waiting room, "Be back in 5 minutes, sit, stay." In a restaurant window, "Don't stand there and be hungry. Come on in and get fed up." Padinundre? 3 technicians guys go into an interview for a job at the local telephone company. They were all 3 great candidates and very well qualified. The boss brings them into the office and says, "Okay, you 3 look the best on paper, but I gotta know if you have what it takes for the day-to-day work. So, I'm gonna give you 1 day to impress me. Set as many telephone poles as you can and report back tomorrow." They all 3 go to work setting poles and return the next day into the boss's office. The boss asks one by one how many they set. The first guy set 13. "Wow, 13! That is impressive," the boss tells him happily. The second guy set 9. "Well," said the boss, "not as good as the first guy, but still it is impressive." He turns to the third guy. "How many did you set?" the boss asks. "2. The man replies triumphantly, his blonde hair waving in the wind. "2. That's it?" The manager was shocked. "That's barely any. What were you doing all day?" "Well, I didn't want to have to be a snitch, but these other guys, they only put theirs halfway in the ground." But a couple went out for breakfast at a restaurant offering the seniors special. 2 eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast for just $2.99. "That sounds great," said the wife, "but I don't want the eggs." "Well, then I'll have to charge you $3.49 since you're ordering a la carte," the waiter informed her. "You're telling me I have to pay more for not taking the eggs?" she asked, surprised. "Yes, ma'am," the waiter confirmed. "Fine, I'll take the special," the wife said. "Perfect. How would you like your eggs?" "Raw, in the shell," she answered. She took the eggs home and used them to bake a cake. Moral of the story: don't mess with seniors. We've been around long enough to know a thing or two. Padimundra pulli pulli pulli. John worked hard to support his family, and for his birthday, his wife decided he deserved a special treat. She blindfolded him and took him to a local strip club. When they arrived, the doorman greeted them with a friendly, "Hey, John, how you doing?" Confused, his wife removed the blindfold and asked if he had been there before. "Oh no," John replied casually. "He's one of the security guys I meet on my business trips." Once they were seated, a waitress approached and asked John if he wanted his usual drink, bringing him a Budweiser. His wife's discomfort grew as she questioned, "How did she know you drink Budweiser?" John shrugged, saying, "I recognize her. She's the waitress from the bar around the corner from my office. I stop by for a bud every Friday, honey." Suddenly, a stripper approached their table, wrapped her arms around John and purred, "Hi, Johnny. Want your usual table dance, big boy?" Fuming, his wife grabbed her purse and stormed out of the club. John quickly followed, spotting her getting into a cab. Just as she was about to slam the door, he jumped in beside her. "Wait, it's a misunderstanding. She must have confused me with someone else," he pleaded, but his wife was having none of it. She yelled at him, unleashing a torrent of 4-letter words. The cab driver turned around, eyebrows raised, and remarked, "Geez, John, you really picked a winner this time." Grandpa got his hearing back, and a whole new perspective. For years, Mr. Harold Thompson had trouble hearing enough that his grandkids often joked he was only half in the conversation. Truth be told, Harold didn't mind missing a few details here and there, but eventually he decided it was time to do something about it. He visited a specialist, got fitted with some top-of-the-line hearing aids, and like magic, the world came back to life. Birds chirped, music was crisp, and for the first time in years, he could understand every word people were saying without leaning in or nodding politely. A month later, he returned for a checkup. "Well, Mer Thompson," the doctor smiled, looking over the charts. "Your hearing is now excellent. I bet your family is thrilled." Harold chuckled, leaned forward, and whispered, "Oh, I haven't told them yet." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "I just sit quietly in the corner and listen," Harold said, eyes twinkling. "You wouldn't believe what people say when they think you can't hear a thing." He paused, then added with a grin, "Let's just say I've updated my will 5 times already."